Oh my gosh, did you guys ever leave me the most awesome questions? Hi guys, it's Amanda and I am here to answer your questions. And oh my gosh, did you guys ever leave me the most awesome questions? As you know, for my 1,000 subscriber thank you and giveaway video, I asked you guys to leave me questions for my Q&A. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you guys for your outpouring of not only awesome questions, but just really kind, genuine comments. You guys just really spoke to my heart and I just really appreciate that. So thank you for all the kind things that you said. So thank you for that affirmation and that reassurance. It just really makes me feel like I'm in the right place doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So you guys are gonna have to bear with me. Probably gonna have to break this into like 2, maybe even 3 videos because you guys left so many awesome questions and I'm going to try and answer them as fast as I can. Some of the questions are going to require videos all on their own to answer just because I can't, you know, answer them in depth in a short little Q&A. So I will try to touch on the questions as much as I can. Some of the questions I have answered previously in other videos, which I will link down in the description and in the cards. And if you guys don't know how the cards work, that's the little eye that shows up here in the corner. You know, when a little suggested video comes up across the top, that's where I can insert a video that's related to what I'm talking about. And if you click on that eye, it shows the list of all the videos that I mention, and then you can go watch those videos after you watch this video. So it like saves those videos for later. Anyway, if you guys didn't know how cards work, that's how it works. All right guys, so here we go. Margot Peterson asks, what is your favorite thing about making YouTube videos? And what's the most difficult thing about making YouTube videos? And what do you want to make sure that your future self knows and remembers when you reach 100,000 subscribers? Well, okay, so my favorite thing about making YouTube videos, gosh, I think I've mentioned this many times before, but just the community that there is in YouTube. Like, seriously, it's an amazing community. I have found just so much support in a like-minded community of people who are interested in having a similar kind of lifestyle and raising their kids in a similar way, and it's just so cool. I feel like I have made some amazing friends through YouTube. You guys all know who you are, and I just think it's so cool that I would have never had those connections without it. And some other things that I enjoy about YouTube are, I really felt like, you know, I've heard other YouTubers say this as well. It's like when you first start out, you're just kind of like timid and you feel really, really weird talking to a camera like I'm doing right now. But as you do it more, you gain more confidence. And I think that this whole YouTube process for me has really been a process in becoming a more confident person in general. I really feel like making these videos has really helped me come into my own, and it's really helped me to like affirm my beliefs and like own my beliefs about things. And you know, just the process of having to like organize my thoughts and say them out loud, that has been a really positive like personal growth thing for me. And the other thing I really like about it is just documenting. I am just so happy that like I documented my entire pregnancy with Sophie and like all of her updates and updates about Alex, and just documenting fun things that we've done in our lives. I think I think our whole family will just be so happy that we will have those things to look back on, you know, in the future when the kids are older. I think that they'll just be great memories, and I'll be really glad that I have that documented, especially on video, just to see how the kids were at this or that specific age. And I think it'll just be really cool to look back on. In terms of the most difficult thing about making videos, probably just the time that it takes. I think a lot of people don't realize how much time goes into making YouTube videos, and I say that not in a complaining kind of way because I really enjoy the whole process and I really enjoy doing this. But I think the difficult aspect of it is just figuring out how to juggle all that with all of my other responsibilities as well, because I do spend a couple hours a day on YouTube, either if it's filming or most of my time is spent editing. Actually, that's probably the vast majority of the time. And then once it's uploaded, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do, you know, like with your title and your description and the tags for if people are searching your video, and there's just a whole lot of these little details that you have to do that most people don't even realize. And so I think the biggest challenge is just figuring out how to balance that time. And then what do you want to make sure my future self knows if I were to reach 100,000 subscribers? Oh my gosh, I really don't know if I would ever reach 100,000 subscribers. That would probably be years down the road, but gosh, if I ever get to that point, I guess probably the one thing that I would want to remind myself of is just why I started doing this in the first place. Like I said in my previous video, the reason I started doing YouTube is just that I really want to help people, and I don't ever want to lose sight of that focus, because that is my primary motivation. You know, I don't ever want to get caught up in anything else related to YouTube. I'm not like doing this for seeking money and fame and that kind of thing, and ultimately, like, even like the whole fame idea truly kind of makes me uncomfortable because I'm an introverted person, and the idea of me putting myself out there on the internet still makes me feel uncomfortable sometimes. I'm like, what am I doing? And then I realize I really feel like this is a God thing. I'm doing this for a reason, and then that kind of restores my confidence. But at the same time, I'm like, if I were to get to 100,000 subscribers, or, you know, anything bigger than that, I would start to feel like I'm not sure if I want to get any bigger than that, you know? But I feel like it's in God's hands. Whatever happens with my channel happens, and ultimately I just wanted to remind myself, if I get to that point, that I don't want to lose sight of my focus, that ultimately this is about helping people. And also Margot Peterson asked, would love to know about your camera and tools. Now this is one that I am going to make a different video about. I do have all of the equipment that I use linked in the description of every video that I make, starting as of like last week or so. I made that part of my automatic description, and so you can check out the description box, and I do have links to all of the video equipment that I use if you just want a quick rundown, see what I use. I think in the future I will make an actual video talking about specifically the cameras that I use and the editing software I use and stuff that I have used that hasn't worked, pros and cons, that kind of thing, and just some tips about YouTubing in general and some of the logistics behind it. But a quick rundown is basically the main camera that I use. I'm filming on it right now. I'm using a Canon 60D, which is a digital SLR, and I love this camera. I got it 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm kind of a hobby photographer on the side. I guess you could say semi-professional. I've never had any formal education surrounding photography, but it's just something I've always really enjoyed doing. Whenever we go places, I always take my camera with me. I just do like artsy kind of stuff with my camera, and I have done photo shoots for people I know in the past as this kind of a side business. I did do one wedding for a friend. I normally wouldn't do it because it's a huge job and a lot of stress, but I did do that for a friend once, and I have done like pregnancy shots. I did a senior photo shoot once, and I've done like engagement photos, like just things for friends like that. So I've had this camera. I had it all along. I got it even before I knew I wanted to be a vlogger. So when I made the decision that I wanted to start doing YouTube, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I already have a camera that works really well. It does HD video. It's really high quality. So I'm really glad that I had this. I would definitely recommend it, except I would recommend getting the next step up from the one I have, because it does not have autofocus. And it works great for these sit-down videos that I do, because it just like focuses on me and I'm not like moving all over the place. But if I'm doing a vlog style video or something that's moving around, following the kids around or whatever, it doesn't work so well for that. I actually use a Canon S110 for that kind of thing. It was generally really good, except it made this clicking sound. And if you look back at some of my videos from around that time, I used that camera, and you can hear that clicking sound. And I don't know what's wrong with it. I guess it's just a flaw. And then I also just have like a Manfrotto tripod. I also have a Joby Tripod, which is one of those things that just like can grab onto any surface. And then in terms of editing software, I started using Corel Video Studio when I first started YouTube, and I learned all of the ropes on that software. But like I mentioned in my last video, it got really glitchy on me, so I ended up getting the Sony Movie Studio, I think it's called, and that has been working really, really well for me. So I've been really satisfied with that. So that is the main rundown of what I use for my equipment and my videos and everything. And like I said, I'll do a whole video going into detail about all of that later. All right, next question. So T Walls asks, what books, reading material do you recommend for first-time moms who plan on breastfeeding? That's a great question. I definitely have a whole library of parenting books that I got when I was pregnant with my son the first time around. I think the most helpful breastfeeding book that I had was The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding, and it's put out by La Leche League. It's a book that's like this thick, and it has like every possible thing you can imagine in it. Like, it's really supportive. If I had some sort of problem, I went to that book and looked for help there. So that's definitely my #1 book recommendation for breastfeeding. All right, next question is from Helene. Is that how you say her name? Helene Olson. And she says, have you had any negative feedback from family and such about certain crunchy decisions you have made? For instance, cloth diapering, and how do you handle it? That's a really good question. And ultimately the decisions I make in terms of my crunchy lifestyle or my crunchy parenting are all based on a lot of research that I have done and also trying to implement it in what works. Those things have to both come together for me to actually practice it. So there are a lot of things that people would consider like frou-frou. I don't know if you've heard that term, frou-frou. I think to the non-crunchy world, I think that some of the crunchy lifestyle things that people do appear to be like superstition almost. That it's not based in reality, or that it's not, you know, based in science, that kind of thing. But I am also a very science-minded person. So the things I do have to be backed by science and backed by experience, because I think there's value in both. And there are things that science misses that people experience. So all that is to say, when somebody is like questioning something that I'm doing, I usually will tell my story. Like, for example, the way we eat. We eat a like Weston A. Price diet or a traditional diet, eating the way our ancestors ate before processed foods. You know, that's like the line that I tell people when they ask about our diet. And I basically tell our story and talk about the health struggles that we have been through and how they have been completely turned around and healed by eating that way. And I think that that speaks to people. When you're not just doing it just because, oh, this is a fad, but because like, oh, there's actual like research behind this and I've tried it and it has changed my life. I think there's power in that. Just talking about how these natural choices that you've made have actually changed your life. Not that you have to be like preachy about it, because I think some people view crunchy people as like getting kind of preachy and evangelical about their crunchy way of living. But I think that just talking about it in those terms, just your own experience with it rather than trying to preach it, comes across a lot better to people. And I think just living that way and people just seeing, you know, if they're seeing that you're living a healthy, vibrant life, they're going to want to know, well, what is it that you're doing? There are just lots of good little conversation starters like that. There are a handful of people in my life that are, you know, skeptical about this thing and that thing that I do. And, you know, we still just have a mutual respect for each other and can agree to disagree. And that's okay too. You know, you're not going to be able to agree with everybody on everything about lifestyle. And who knows? I don't have all the answers, and I'm not claiming that the way I live is the way for everybody to live, you know? So I think ultimately it's just about having respectful conversation with people and having that conversation based in your experience and how this or that thing that you do is actually backed by science and that kind of thing. And like you said, for like cloth diapering, for example, I just think it's another great conversation starter to have with people. If people think I'm crazy for cloth diapering, I can say I'm actually saving $2,000 a year by doing mostly cloth diapering. We do some disposable, but by doing mostly cloth diapering, we're saving a ton of money, and that speaks to people. Or just giving statistics about how the average baby goes through 5,000 diapers before they're potty trained, like each child, and just imagining in your head that mountain of diapers per child adding to the landfill. So I just feel like talking about those kinds of things in those kinds of terms is a good way to reach people, and so they don't think that you're crazy, that there's actually good reason to do these things, you know? And in the end, you know, you can't reach everybody, and like I said, you just have to agree to disagree with people sometimes, and that's okay too. All right, next question is from Carla Ricker, and she says, what state do you live in, and do you want any more children? So I live in Washington State, in Western Washington, in the like greater Seattle area. And so I am definitely a Northwest girl, born and raised, and I absolutely love it here. It's just a gorgeous, beautiful, amazing place, and it is my home. And then, do I want any more children? I actually asked this one in my last Q&A, and I will link that here, but I'll just answer it briefly here. If you want to see more depth, you can go watch that video. Basically, the answer is we are undecided. We're kind of waiting to see how we feel when Sophie gets to be like around 2 or so, because if we are going to have a third, we want there to be a bigger age gap between Sophie and the next one than we did between Alex and Sophie. Having 2 kids in diapers and 2 kids 3 and under, it's nuts. It's just a little nuts sometimes. If we're going to have a third, I want my kids to be just a little bit older and both potty trained first. So that's our criteria, but ultimately, you know, we're praying about it. We kind of have a feeling like maybe we're supposed to have a third, but we just don't know for sure, and we're okay with that just being up in the air right now. And if we really feel like a nudge from God, like this is the time and you really are supposed to have one more, then that's what we'll do. And sometimes surprises happen, you know. Trying pretty hard right now to not let that happen, but if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But if we do have a third, that will probably be our last, just because we feel like with the resources that we have the value of wanting to be able to send all of our kids to college and or trade school, whatever it is, the path that they pursue. It's important to us that they do some sort of higher education, and we feel like 3 is about the maximum of what we can handle in terms of paying for higher education for our kids. So if we have one more, that one will probably be the last. So the short answer is we shall see. All right, next question is from Bethany Montgomery, and she says, how are your children similar to you and your husband? I love this question because I'm thinking about this all the time, just watching my kids and as their little personalities develop and just seeing features that they have and that kind of thing. It's fascinating to me how kids are like their parents. I would say that in terms of like physical features, I mean, if you have watched our videos, Alex is the spitting image of Bill and Sophie is the spitting image of me. Alex very much overall looks a lot like Bill does, with a few exceptions. And I've had a lot of time to like sit and study their features and everything, so I've thought a lot about this. But so Alex looks mostly like Bill in almost all his features, except for the shape of his eyes are like mine, but the spacing of them is Bill's, which is interesting. Oh, and Alex also has my chin dimple, but everything else he looks just like his daddy. And Sophie, as you have seen, she looks just like me. It's actually really scary looking at my baby pictures. In fact, I'm going to insert a picture here that I posted a while back where she's wearing some of my baby clothes that my mom saved from when I was a baby. I'll put that here. Isn't that a little crazy? Oh my gosh, she's like seriously like my little clone. So, although she is getting a little bit bigger, I do see a couple of Bill's features in her, just a little bit like in her mouth, and actually the shape of her head, which is kind of interesting, is the shape of Bill's head. Funny little features you don't normally think about, but everything else about her is like, looks exactly like me. In terms of personality, I think their personalities sway those ways as well. Little Alex is very much like his daddy. Bill is an engineer, and Alex very much has the engineer mind. He is very detail oriented. He is very routine oriented. He likes the world to make sense and have order. And he is also a highly intellectual and verbal little guy, and that is very much like his dad. I mean, Bill and I are both pretty verbal, but especially just that precociousness, I would say, is very much like his daddy, because I hear that Bill was like that as a little guy too. And then in terms of Sophie, her temperament is just like I was as a baby. My parents say that I was just like the most mellow, easygoing baby smiling all the time, and that's exactly how Sophie is. I mean, obviously except when she's hurt or, you know, upset about this or that, but most of the time she's just a happy little thing. And she's also very shy, which I was very much that way when I was a little kid as well. I mean, I'm an introvert, and as a kid it was like very pronounced. My mom would try and get me to say hi to strangers, and I would just like bury my face in my mom's leg. You know, I was so shy. I think that Sophie might be that way a little bit too. You know, Alex is like the brainy verbal kid, and Sophie is very much like the kinesthetic kid. And I think that she gets that from me as well. I can tell that she's really good at like fine motor skills. I love doing things with my hands, and I think that she's going to be that way as well. She's just like very good at manipulating things with her hands, and the gross motor skills. She's climbing. Long story short, Alex is a lot like his daddy in just about every way, and Sophie is just a lot like me in every way. Next question is from Aphrodite D, and she asks, would you ever adopt or foster, and what are some of your favorite baby names? So first of all, would we ever adopt? It's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. When we were facing our infertility struggle, it was something we were very seriously considering. I know that there are so many kids and babies out there who need loving homes, like domestically, worldwide. It's almost overwhelming how many kids need good homes. And I really feel like if that was something that we felt strongly that God was calling us to, that we would do it. It's definitely not something for us in this current season of life. It would have to be something that was in the future, and something like we were feeling strongly called to. So we're definitely open to the idea, and I think adoption and fostering is an amazing thing. I'm not sure, just being totally transparent, I'm not sure if Bill and I quite have the personalities that it would take to do foster care. It really takes a special kind of person to do that, and I'm just not sure if we have the what it takes emotionally and like the stamina. And I say that knowing the situations of many of our friends who have done foster care, and those friends have that kind of personality, and I see what it is that they have that it takes to do that. So if we were to adopt, we would probably do it, you know, through an adoption agency somehow. That's our thoughts on that. And then a more light question, what are some of your favorite baby names? I actually have this little journal right here with me, and this is what I called my idea scrapbook. And I started an idea scrapbook when I was in high school, I think, and this is my second or third one now that I've gone through. And I always just write down ideas that I have about things, or if I'm feeling inspiration about something or needing to reflect on something. I put it in this little journal, and I started this, I actually dated it. I started August 22nd, 2006. So this little thing is 10 years old, and I'm still working on it. But one of the first things I wrote in here was baby names that I liked, that I started this list 10 years ago. So it's interesting to see that on this list towards the top is Sophia. So I ended up actually naming one of my kids one of my favorite names. And there are a lot of names on here that I have actually gone over with Bill and that he wouldn't agree to. So I will tell you some of the names that I like that I know that we won't actually name our kids, because it's not something that Bill would agree on, but you can kind of get an idea from my taste. For girls, I have always really liked the name Anya, Maya, Kaya, that kind of name. You know, we ended up naming our son Alex, but I also liked the female versions of that, like Alexis, Alexa, Lexi, that kind of thing. I also like some older names like Clara and Grace. And then there's some interesting names that I've just heard kids named over the years that I wrote down that I liked, like Anea. I thought that was kind of pretty. And Annalie and Ava. That one is like really popular right now, so I tend to not want to do ones that are like insanely popular. Although, you know what, my kids' names are on the top 10 list and have been, so whatever. Taya and Kira, Ariana, Violet. That's an example of some of the ones that I wrote on my list for girls. For boys, I like the name Nolan and Judah, and let's see, Spencer, Mason. I have Alex on there. Would you look at that? There's some of these names that that I like the full name version, but not the nickname. So like, I like the name Douglas, but I don't like the name Doug. You know, so there are names like that. Like, I like the name Jeffrey, but I don't like the name Jeff. I actually wrote down some other ones that I liked then that I don't like as much now, like the N names. Probably just because they're so popular now, but like Aiden, Caden, that kind of name. I really like the name Kai. I actually ran that one by Bill quite a bit when we were trying to come up with a boy name, and he's just not on board with that. He doesn't want something that sounds trendy to him. Anyway, there is just a sampling from names that I wrote in my name book during the last 10 years. And the ones that I just listed are not ones that we would actually name a child in the future. So anyway, there's just a sampling of my taste. And the next question is from my girl Emily from Matt and M. And she says, what is one piece of advice you would give a first-time mom? I think that the one piece of advice I would give a first-time mom is give yourself grace. That is the one thing that I have learned after being a parent for three short years now, but I've learned a little something, is that we are our own worst critics sometimes, especially when it comes to parenting. And you realize that once that actual living, breathing baby is in your arms and they grow into toddlers and they have little independent wills and, you know, all of the things that you had foreseen for how things were going to go are not necessarily going to go that way. Sometimes they do. In fact, a lot of the times they do, but a lot of the times they also don't. And I mean, for me, I have beat myself up over some of those things in the past, and I have come to a point where I realized I just need to give myself grace. I actually made a whole video about this. If you haven't seen it, I will link it right here, about swallowing your mama pride. And it all just comes down to doing your best, but realizing, you know what, we're human, our kids are human, and ultimately you just have to give yourself a lot of grace because you need it being a parent. So that is my advice. So I think I'm going to stop part 1 there and stay tuned for part 2. I will continue answering questions in that video. Talk to you guys later. Bye.